Hey guys.
Hey.
Um, we're just waiting on 2, 1.
Yeah, I think probably just one, right?
One,
It's
2, 5, 6. No, 2. We can give them until like 11:05.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering if they're gonna make it because of the fender bender thing.
Oh no, that was me.
Oh, that was you? Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Morning.
Morning. I'm so
All right.
Oh.
So, are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So, question 1 says, in what ways did the rhetoric, strategies, and decisions by Gore and Bush supporters of the 2000 election set a political, not legal precedent for fallout of the 2020 election? Um, I think the recount was the biggest precedent set, because especially like with the 2020 election, like how, especially like the legal process and everything too, how Donald Trump did the same thing. And I feel like um yeah, maybe that probably wouldn't have happened or been an option. But I don't know. Donald Trump is a very out there character, so maybe it could have happened as well. But yeah, that's what I think.
I said that for me, one of the things that was most similar is like, I mean, not exactly the same, but I think the Trump's campaign used some similar um rhetoric to some of like Bush's campaign that time. At times, like I remember when they were talking about the like I guess the protest or whatever that erupted outside of the elections office, and they were talking about how people were saying like steal the vote and stuff, which is very similar to like Trump's rhetoric. So do you think in that way the like use of some of these phrases to try to get people like angry and ready to fight was similar?
Yeah, I remember Bush, he was saying like stop the recount or something, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
And Trump was just like stop the vote altogether. Stop.
Yeah, it's definitely different in that way, but like I think there's similar like they took some of the phrasing and some of the stuff that they felt like was effective in getting supporters out there.
Yeah.
I think.
I had more so thoughts of the second half of the question, so I was gonna wait on to talk about
Okay.
I
Um,
mean, for me, I just wrote about the Brooks Brother riot. I kind of thought how like that riot is more connection to the 2020 election, how we have a more of a occurrence of political movements and how they wanted to storm the hallways and stuff like that. But it's kind of similar, but not at the same time. Because this one was peaceful, and the 2020 was more violent.
It was
like,
kind of peace. It wasn't peaceful necessarily.
yeah.
I don't know.
Would you say violent and like with the like the people being more
Because
violent?
like in the podcast, I said it says the Brook brothers was like it was like lawyers during the storming and to get to the recount room. So I
Right.
thought it was the main difference.
Okay.
no one died. I think that's
Yeah.
like the biggest thing.
Yeah, No,
Uh,
And
that's true.
I feel like in the 2000 election as well, that was a lot of like um attacks on the parties too as well, not just the people running for candidates. I think Trump really took that and ran with it and kind of made his whole campaign about, oh, the Democrats are bad or they don't want what's best for you type of thing.
Yeah, I think I answered that way in a later uh, question, but oh no, I didn't. So yeah, I said similar rhetoric about like it's us versus them and these parties and like we're both trying to fight it out. So whose side are you on? Kind
Yeah.
of thing in a way, which but it's also kind of common,
Yeah,
unfortunately. But then I was also thinking for me something that I saw similarities like as far as the protest or the like the riot or whatever versus the Capitol was both of them were like really intense like I think they were both trying to use intimidation as a tactic
for sure.
versus like like a regular protest I guess is kind of more so supposed to be like showing support and like showing there's all this like support and these mass numbers and stuff. But I think both of these really went like the intimidation route, and I saw that as a big similarity.
Yeah. Okay. For the next part of the question, Ryan, did you want to start off?
yeah, sure. I basically said that like, well, I'll wait to read it. In your opinion, is it fair to draw so many similarities between the 2000 and 2020 elections, or are the differences between the two too profound to harp on the similarities? I'm kind of in the middle of this question, but I guess I lean more on the negative side, being that like there's too many differences. In my opinion, one being the context of it all, like the time period, I think has a big um hold on what was going on. Like for example, there was no social media, as like the later questions talk about. And so I think there was a form of media, but it's television and newspapers. Like there's only but so much propaganda you can throw at somebody to which they'll believe it. Whereas in 2020, like everyone had a platform. So that was one of mine. And I'll say another one. The voting methods are not the same as 2020 election was compared to the 2000 election. We've evolved and with electoral college even, but the popular vote and that still say the same. So that was like one of the cons that I kept going back and forth of when answering that question. But I think there's too many differences.
Yeah, I said something along the same lines with like I just think like um well, I said at first that the 2020 election was kind of like a diet version of the 2000, but it's not too similar because like I just feel like the 2000 election was just an actual like complete fiasco, like an entire thing. Whereas the 2020 election, like it was mostly just like I don't know. It wasn't really a whole like thing. There wasn't too many events going on to where like people might side with one person or the other. Like with the election now, with the whole um Israel Palestine conflict, like there's stuff going on with that where presidents can use that kind of in a way. Um but yeah, I didn't really think that there was too many similarities. I feel like that the 2020 election probably would have played out the exact same if the 2000 election didn't really happen or didn't get as crazy.
I
I
also
was
put them. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say I was kind of going. Oh, my like answers were going kind of off of, like what Kiana was saying, kind of about like the whole fiasco thing, where it's like the differences coming between like in 2000 there was like an actual reason for there to be kind of like some chaos because there was like a reason for there to be like a recount versus 2020 there was only kind of a quote there was you can only kind of call it a quote fiasco anyway it's just because Trump was just kind of like complaining that he lost versus Al Gore being like, look, the margins are lit in all that whole and everything that happened in 2000. So
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off that because I kind of put something really similar. It was just like I feel like you can draw certain similarities in like the fact of like Gore and Trump both wanted recounts in order to overturn an election in their favor, but like I think the circumstances in which it was done and the way that it was done was like kind of night and day. Where like you said, Trump was kind of just complaining that he lost, so he tried to go to like Georgia and like Florida, or no, not Florida. He went to like Georgia, it's the big one that I remember, and tried to like fight his way through the courts there to find votes. Where like I feel like Gore did it in a more legitimate way and had legitimate reasons for actually like pushing through with a recount with like I remember the butterfly ballots and like how those were kind of really bad and like really confusing. So yeah,
Episode,
I feel like yeah.
yeah. No, go ahead. I was just saying episode 3 for like.
Oh yeah. Sorry, my computer cut out and I didn't hear all of that. My bad.
No, you're good.
But yeah, no, I was just wrapping it up. It's just I think Gore just had more legitimate grounds to stand on for a recount, where Trump was kind of just like going around trying to scratch and claw and to win an election that he clearly lost.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that as well. I heard how they were bringing up that Gore was like a sore loser in a way, and I really didn't like align with that thought process because I feel
Mhm.
like you said it was a very legitimate reason to recount, whereas I feel like Donald Trump was, if anything, a sore loser in comparison.
I kind of
Definitely.
I think I made similar points to you guys, but like what I really did was I just like I felt it was very different, like you guys did as well. And the really like the key points that I thought of that I felt like made such a difference was that like Trump was challenging several states and Al Gore was really talking about this like much more specific area, even
Yeah,
like
just
three
South Florida.
counties. Yeah, like a couple counties in this very specific area, which I think makes a huge difference in like what you're actually challenging. Because also these recounts are going to come down to maybe a couple hundred votes, you know? So you're not gaining thousands and thousands of votes like he needed.
Yeah, because it was really close in the election, anyways.
Yeah.
So,
And then like kind of to go with that is that like Biden was winning us by a significant amount. Like the popular vote, I believe it was in millions that he was ahead on the popular vote. So like there was not really any.
reason, yeah.
Yeah, right. This was not a close election. With such a close election, there's so much more like nuance to happen and so many more fights. But I do think in a lot of ways Trump's campaign took from the toolbox of these guys though. I just think it's not necessarily similar.
Yeah.
I definitely agree.
Anybody else want to add?
I had something to say about it.
Yeah.
I kind of thought of it a different way. I mean, I thought it was similar and different at the same time because, like, if you think about it, the 2000 election, after the election, we had 9/11. And then for 2020, after the election, we had like Ukraine. So I thought like similar in that aspect, like the foreign issues and then United States rallying together and type stuff. And then for the differences, I thought like campaign funding and like the way we go about with commercials and stuff. So I think like 2020 is way different compared to 2000 in the way how political candidates like get ready to run for office and gain support and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially because of like social media, just
Mhm.
campaigning on TikTok and stuff.
Social media is two-way too. That's something I really thought about, like that I was really thinking about. It's like both sides can chat while TV is just talking to you.
Yeah, that
That
is.
makes a big impact for me because like the candidates can say stuff to you, right? Like on social media, you can say stuff to them.
And they see like in real time, like your
Yeah,
concerns and stuff.
No, yeah.
exactly.
And there's a sense of accountability. That's
Right.
also
I'm gonna read question 2, but one of y'all can start off with an answer. At what point former Florida Secretary of State Catherine Harris tells the podcast host that the 2000 election wasn't a fiasco like his title suggests. Instead, she says that the media created the fiasco. What do you make of Harris's assertion? Assertion.
I could start this one off. Um, I kind of agree with that statement. I do feel like, in a sense, that the whole the entire situation was a fiasco. So I kind of agree, disagree, but I do agree that the media did to an extent blow it out of proportion. I remember, I think it was episode 2 or 3. Really should have done the episodes on this paper. I think it was episode 2. They were talking about how within news stations when they were covering the story, they actually they pre-called the election for Bush or Gore, and then it was way too close to call, so then it flipped. And I found that super interesting because that kind of people were like, "What's going on?" Because they just called Gore, but now it's with Bush, and it created a lot of unnecessary like not stress, but it created a lot of unnecessary drama.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Just
agree with that. I said something similar, um, which was that also that was from episode 2, I think. And I said a similar thing that it's very clear that the beginning of this fiasco was started by the media in that way of the um calling the race too early and all that kind of stuff. Um, but I do think that at the same time, the closeness of these ballots and the court and stuff, none of that is because of the media. So in that way, a lot of it is just it truly was a fiasco.
Yeah. Um, I brought up the point when Joe Lieberman had went on TV in episode 3, I believe, and he was talking about they should be a little lenient with the overseas ballots, kind of contradicting what Gore was saying, who he was running with. So I think that the media, I feel like Gore probably wouldn't have been as mad at Lieberman if he knew that the media wasn't going to kind of take that and run with it. Because in a way, they were thinking oh, you don't even really trust your president. How can we trust him? Why are we recounting the votes type of thing?
Mhm. I I also was kind of divided in the question as Aiden was. But I was looking through my notes in episode 3, and I guess just what you said about Joseph Lieberman, him going back on what Gore was saying was evident of the media wasn't really backhanding them at that time. I felt like they were just giving him a platform to be stupid. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I don't know if it was really the media's fault or if it was just their poor PR team. And so I couldn't really tell which one it was, but then I just ultimately went with the media because that's the outlet, and we wouldn't have had that, you know, transfer without it. So
then
Yeah.
also, didn't the media they didn't want to admit that it was wrong and then calling it too early? Like he said, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stay
Oh yeah.
silent.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so Justice Stevens, in his dissenting opinion, wrote that we may never know with complete certainty the identity of this year's presidential election, but that didn't stop the media from conducting forensic postmortems after all was said and done. What do you think about the media's assertion that they had a responsibility to investigate who really won the election? I honestly said that's kind of their job in a way, to kind of be messy and investigate stuff like that. The media is always going to be messy and they're always going to be biased. And I just feel like they kind of did have that responsibility because who else was going to do it? You're just going to have people just um, what is the word? Making up conspiracy theories maybe about whatever was happening. So I feel like the media kind of coming in as that middleman is saying that they should investigate who really won kind of also eased people a little bit, maybe like ease their mind, not having to like go into crazy conspiracies about like who could have won.
Right. I think the media plays like almost like a translator for all the confusing language that the government people are using into like dumbfounded language that's digestible. But I think that's also at the fault of the media why like the citizens take such harsh and extreme sides because obviously it's slated towards one side or another. I got that in episode 3 of like that vibe of I don't know. I feel like the citizens are often confused, and so that was like the assertion I made to answer that question. Like, yeah, it's their job to inform, but it's also at the fault of the media when it's not necessarily clear. I feel like it's always not an open-ended conversation, but it's almost like every point that the media made during this election was, well, you know who the bad guy is. So that's just what I took away from it.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of took away that like it definitely is like I think the media, regardless of if they should have or not, were going to do it because of how close the race was, because it was such like a monumental kind of section within history, because like it's one of the closest races we ever had. But I feel like they should have also let it die down too, because it was such like an issue that so many people cared about. Like I had to kind of put like, if they would have waited to die down, it mentioned in episode 6 that like after Bush was elected, his approval ratings were like through the roof. I want to say they were like in the like 80 to 90 percentile or some shit. Like it was crazy. So like I do think that no matter if they were supposed to, it was their responsibility or not, they were going to, because people are gonna want to know. And like I think like Ren said, like it's kind of their job.
Um, to piggyback off Aiden, I know like that part in episode 6 it says like the reason his support went to 80% because of the 9/11 and like the election just came like a thing for the past. So that's where I found that part at.
Wait, can you repeat that?
So like the reason that his support went up to 80% because in episode 6 it says like because 9/11 happened and nobody like really cared about who really won the election. They just wanted to, you know, deal with 9/11. So that was a thing of the past.
Yeah.
I said similar to you guys that, but I kind of went down the route of like legally versus socially, because like legally it might have been sorted out, but that doesn't leave people like satisfied necessarily, because I think ultimately most people would agree that like what they wanted to know was who actually won the votes, not like who legally had this and this and this, you know? And so I'm not surprised, because we can talk about who like won the election, but I think, of course the media is going to want to know like, was this election stolen or whatever, because that's like a giant story as well, to be able to broadcast that and say this is happening and this is happening. So yeah, I kind of agreed with you guys. I was like, I don't know if it's a responsibility necessarily, but like they were gonna do it. Who's surprised? Like that is what they do, you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Oh, you first. You go first. I already
sorry,
talked.
now I was gonna say I was gonna piggyback off of you when you said that they should have let it die down. I did think that it was gonna happen regardless, but they definitely should have let it die down. It was kind of irresponsible of them to kind of feed into the adrenaline of everybody in the race and everything.
I think they said they did it like, if you remember hearing it correctly, I think they said they did it like 2 months into Bush's into his term that they decided to do the recount, but I'm not sure.
I mean, I have the investigation results if y'all want to hear them real quick.
Yeah.
So like it says under a strict standard, if the recount occurred, the margin would have been 3 votes and Gore would have won that one. And then it says furthermore, if every undervote and overvote was recounted by hand, Gore would have won Florida by a slim margin. But in theory, all the Florida undervotes and overvotes would not be accounted because of the deadline, I think. So that wouldn't happen in a normal sense. So
Yeah.
I think I remember hearing in the podcast that they tried like 4 different methods or whatever for like how like strict they like counted the votes, and it was only the strict one where, just like you said, they had Gore only won by like 3.
Oh yeah. I remember that when it was like when I think one of Catherine Harris's lawyers like told the guy like, no, you need to recount this the right way, the way we did in like the 80s. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm just talking about like near the end, kind of when they did their own investigation. I think they
Oh,
said they did like 4 different like following 4 different guidelines or whatever, 4 different versions, and only in the version where they followed like the strictest like adherence to the guidelines or whatever was the version where Gore only won by 3. It was something like that.
okay.
and Bush would have won if he went like the liberal guideline, the one that he was opposed of.
Yeah.
I think that was mentioned.
Aiden, you were gonna say something.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna bring up that like kind of piggybacking off what y'all said, like it was irresponsible to bring it up as soon as it was because I was gonna say it would have just made people flip out more if everything came out that Gore would have like clearly won that, and all like everyone who voted for Gore would have just been like, what? Then like I think like you said, it would have been like, was the election stolen? And it would have caused this like crazy rhetoric. I think would have been blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
Also considering recent events and how recent elections have gone, I kind of have reason to believe that it would still happen. It would have happened.
Yeah. Okay. You guys have anything else to add? Okay. Imagine that social media existed in 2000. It didn't, and only about 40% of US households even had very slow internet. In your opinion, how might social media and or other communication technologies have impacted the fallout of the 2000 election, either the mass public or the political actors involved in the election? Um,
Uh, I just thought this was. I think I kind of highlighted it in the last question, but it was in episode 2 that when they news outlets started calling the race early when they were specifically told not to. My big point was how that kind of affected how people saw the race. But actually, just thinking, I didn't write this down, but I also remember it probably affected when the Heron memo got leaked and how when it was kind of trying to show and paint the picture that Gore's kind of disenfranchised voters and that blew up on the news. Like I can't see that. I can see that also causing like negative impacts for the fallout. You know what I mean?
yeah, I said something about like social media, how it's like a big like thing to spread a lot of misinformation. I think um the results of everything would have been a lot more exaggerated because of like how fast misinformation could have been spread, especially with like the the calling of the race too early. Like that would have went crazy on social media. Everyone like what's going on type of thing. So I think social media would have added a lot more chaos for sure.
I'll keep it a buck. I accidentally read off the one above it. I did have something else to add on this one. I was reading the wrong question. I'm gonna just agree with it in short terms. I think that, yeah, adding the presence of like a social media, like adding like an Instagram or a Facebook back in 2000 would have just created like I put false media and biases. People would have just thrown their opinions around. Other people wouldn't have believed them. It was like, oh God, I don't remember who said it earlier, but it was like you're talking person to person, not like a person speaking to a broad group of people like the news does. I think that would have been an impact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I was really focused on this one was that also like communication, the general population's communication with the actual campaigns also would have been affected so significantly because at this time the campaigns are just doing their thing. like they don't have a ton of access, excuse me, necessarily to individuals' opinion. And if you see on social media now, like you can really get oftentimes a very clear climate of how people are feeling about certain decisions. And I think it would have really affected that. And like, I don't know how that would have affected the outcome long term and if that would have made people make different decisions or anything. But I definitely think that could have had a huge impact of being able to like directly see people's opinions about what is happening.
Right.
I was agreeing with McKenna when it came to like thinking about it from like people expressing their opinions from that standpoint, because I believe it was in episode 3 you could hear kind of them like interviewing some people in like the counties who they thought there was like undervotes and stuff like that, and how they were kind of expressing that they were like upset that their vote might not count and their vote might not be considered. And I was just kind of thinking about how like if we had like people going on like Twitter and all those social media apps that like, and they found out their vote might count, and just the amount of like outrage people would have and be speaking out and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I thought about the question.
No, yeah. I basically just said all those things, but mainly everything that wasn't a big deal would have been a bigger deal because like it would have been represented by a group of number of people on the internet as opposed to some underlying fact that goes under the rug. Also the riot would have been huge. Like I think January 6th level low key. Just because of imagine if like the whole world heard about this thing going on, like it would have been insane. So that's another thing I put.
I mean, to pick off Brandon, I just thought like like, they was grilling Catherine Harris for her position, like to strictly follow the deadline in episode 3, and then they made like a little skit on the news channel about her. So I just thought social media would like really grill people like Catherine Harris and the lady that made the butterfly ballot, Teresa. I thought they would just do them real dirty in social media.
Yeah, they would drag them to the ground. So I definitely agree. I was thinking like if we were to have Twitter back then, like it would kind of be funny if like the news outlets would do like live tweets of how people are feeling, like the same way how like you can like live tweet with certain like shows that are coming up or something. I don't know. But yeah, I thought that would be funny to add if it was back in.
But a chat in an election would be crazy, man.
Yeah, that would be actually really funny. A big like Discord for the entire.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so question 3. As you listen to the podcast, were there any arguments made by Bush and or Gore's legal team or campaigns that you thought were more or less compelling? If you were on the Supreme Court, how do you think you would have ruled the case? I personally thought that Gore's fight to recount was very backed. Like he had a legitimate reason to do that, like we said before. But I also feel like Bush trying to stop the recount was not compelling at all because why type of thing. Like it was obvious it's because you were kind of winning and whatnot. So I just feel like them going back and forth with the recounts, I feel like Gore's especially because he had his legal team behind him as well. I feel like Gore's argument was a lot more compelling than Bush's in this. And I think I got that from episode 3.
Yeah, the entire time that they like, every time Bush was like, "Stop the recount! Like, let's not recount." I'm sitting here thinking, like, bro, why are we not just counting votes? Like, what is the reason? That is the point of an election. Like,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I get it and like all this other stuff, but every time I was just like, we're supposed to be counting votes. That's the entire point of this. Like, what's happening here?
And I think
You know,
I
and
think those like counties being like historically liberal, I'm pretty sure also added to that as well. So it's like
no, definitely. I understand why he like his reasoning. I just felt it. I just didn't find it compelling at all because I was like, this is not a good enough reason. um but I also thought that like with that comes the fact that Gore wanted to be like stricter about overseas ballots and this like not each one of them wanting to be more liberal about this ballot count and less liberal about this ballot count. Um because of that, I thought in that way both of their arguments didn't have much like weren't very compelling on either side because it was like they didn't want to have one standard, even though that's kind of what they were arguing over. Um, because these two different like ballot groups. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Wait, is that true? 'Cause I thought like Bush wanted to include the overseas ballots, and like he wanted to have every single one, no matter the standard, and Gore wanted to disqualify them.
No,
Yeah.
wait, Gore wanted to actually like count them. I think Bush wanted to just be like, why do you need why are you going back and recounting them type of thing? Like you should just trust the armed forces.
For real, 'cause I thought Bush used it like as a PR onslaught against Gore.
No, I think you're right, Jan.
They,
What
if
I
I could,
meant by that was that like Bush wanted to be liberal in the votes that we counted from overseas and was like, oh, if they tried,
Oh, okay.
like didn't want to have strict standards about the ballots overseas. While Gore was like, no, it has to be exactly this way. And they had the reverse about the recounts like in counties where Gore was like, well, let's be, their intent is what matters. Like, let's be a little bit looser here. And then Bush was like, no, it must be this way. And so, like, they were contradicting each other in that way, is kind of what I was referring to. Where Gore was like, we should be loose here, but strict here. And Bush was saying the same thing. Does that make sense?
I definitely heard that wrong then.
Okay.
I was about to say that was in episode 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at the right thing. What did I say? Because I think that was a huge talking point for Bush in his campaign. One like you just like Kim just said, the recount, and like how Gore was pretty much kind of like threw out the Heron memo, or I think the Heron memo was a lawyer sending it to Gore that was like intercepted and then like blew up or something like that. I don't know if I caught that right, but like the fact that like everyone took it and was like, well, he's trying to disenfranchise the military, just painted this terrible picture for Gore. Where like, yeah, Bush was kind of just like, don't recount anything. I won. It was like, dog, but like, there's so many factors.
Yeah. Well, the difference too is that the military, like the overseas ballots weren't being recounted. They were being counted for the first time.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that brought up
Yeah.
the issue of the Chaz, right? That was the
Yeah.
Chaz situation. Yeah.
Well, no, those were mostly about the Palm Beach ballots.
Okay.
I also found it interesting that it's kind of off topic a little bit. I found it interesting that Gore tried to um like pick certain like Democratic stronghold counties to find more votes. I remember that was brought up a couple of times, and I remember thinking that was super interesting that he like picked and chose which counties he wanted to recount in order to win.
Yeah, that also kind of like that made his argument a little less compelling as well, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, because like you said, Kiana, like he had a reason. Like Gore had a legitimate reason to like actually want to recount because of there were multiple factors that was like this is a compelling argument. But then why would you only pick and choose? Like I would just say like pick like a mass of like both Democratic and Republican strongholds.
I think they said those were the biggest counties in Florida, though.
I mean, I could see it. It was Miami-Dade and like some of the other big ones. Like I could see it, but it just like you said, it made him look bad because he only picked Democratic. They're only Democratic.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, and if you're like that just creates such easy press of like, oh, he's only trying to recount counties that benefit him. Like even if they are the biggest, like that is just a bad look. And also, I don't know if you guys remember, but his lawyer, I think it was episode 4 that they mentioned this, but it might have been 3. where his lawyer was like, you should recount like you should ask for a recount all across Florida. And he was like, okay, cool. I'm going to ask for a recount in these 3 counties. Or 4, rather. Was it 3 or 4?
I think it was 3. I think it was Volusia, Palm Beach, and Dade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But honestly,
excuse me.
I kind of like, because they were the biggest counties, I honestly I'm just gonna give that one to Gore just because they were, and it's like there's a lot of counties in Florida and they're all relatively small. So it's like, what's the point of getting all of these recounts when you could kind of like hone it in on a certain like it, in a way it kind of represents the majority because they are the biggest counties. So I feel like when you can hone it into just that, and like when you do the whole recount, it's going to take a lot longer. And they were already trying to stop the recount and be very strict with this deadline. So it's like you're kind of trying to work with them in a way as well, you know?
Yeah.
That deadline, I think there was like I want to say it was like episode 4 or 5, where it's like I think it was in Palm Beach, and they had like 1,000 votes or whatever to count left, but I think it was the secretary or whatever was like, yeah, no, that's the deadline. They was like, can we just have a few more hours? So I still think I would have sided a Gore, because it's like if you're gonna recount them, just finish recounting them, even if it's not going to change the version of the election. Just finish the recount, and you might as well.
I feel like
I
if
think
you
that's
have
something
manpower, you
Gore.
can do 1,000 in a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so as the election battles wound down, one of Gore's aides told him that it was wrong to shoot you, but you're still dead. In what ways were the courts, particularly the Florida Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court, damned if they did it and damned if they did and damned if they didn't?
For this one, I more so support towards like they were damned if they didn't, because like it shows. Let me see. Yeah, actually, not mess up what I'm about to say. Okay. I think it damned if they didn't because it shows that they don't respect what a vote means and who's behind the vote. And damned if they did because it would be considered like partisan bias and interference with a voting process that's supposed to be trusted. And again, like leading back to this whole like media thing, I feel like it was just blown out of big proportion for what it really was. But the court's decision being, it's either we respect the vote of the American people or we don't, in my eyes. And so that's the decision they made.
Yeah, I kind of said like they would be wrong both ways because, like you said, the partisan support, either route they would want to take would support one party, not actually support one party in one way, but it would seem that way to people for sure. You guys want anything else?
I mean, I just thought like if they chose not to do anything, it would have been disaster. So they had to do something. I didn't really. I think it's like later in the question is like granting the stay. I don't know how I really felt about that because I felt like there was time to do the counts, but I just I think they had to do something because they didn't. It just because of the deadlines, and then like I remember in the pocket it says like the presidential election is more about the electors that you have, something like that. So I just thought they had to do something.
I feel like to an extent, like the course kind of just ripped off the band-aid to end the election because like it was dragged on for so long. So like I guess it's like damned if they did, because like if they did, the media was already like dragging like talking about how this is such a dragged on election. But if they again kind of like what Ryan said, if they didn't, then yeah, they're pretty much disenfranchising the votes that got screwed over with the butterfly ballot and like all the stuff we talked about prior.
Yeah. Okay. You guys want to move on to the next part?
Sure.
In your opinion, was there any possible way that the American public wouldn't view the actions of Bush, Gore, the courts, and the other characters in the story as being politically motivated. I personally said because of everything that was going on, everything pretty much seemed intentional and for the purpose of winning. So I think anything would have been seen as politically motivated, regardless of whatever they did. Because I think in episode 2, when they brought up Katherine Harris, they pointed out that she wasn't necessarily a Republican, but she was affiliated with Republicans. So even that, like when she was saying that she needs to do this deadline, although she was following the law, it seemed as if she was using that in support of her own party type of thing.
I definitely agree with that, but I was just I put that like I agree that everything that was done because of how long it took and like that it was very everything seemed done for like a purpose. Like it wasn't just like I think I put that the only possible thing that I thought that could be like a non-political reason that like any of the actions happened was like the deadline for like the electoral votes. So like within as the election was concluding, like maybe the reason that like the Supreme Court just decided to throw it just make a possibility that the deadlines are coming up or something like that. But like besides that, everything just seems so done in a way that it was supporting one candidate or the other that I don't think that there's much wiggle room for what isn't politically motivated. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And then I think they also said, I think the person talking also said something about Katherine Harris kind of using her political power to whatever the law, mess with the law, kind of something like that along those lines.
I said similar things to everybody about kind of I felt like there were multiple players like that, but I definitely used Catherine Harris as the example in my answer of like it it like I think her actions did very much seem to skew a certain way, but ultimately like unless you really make a decision that's against your party, it's going to come off as politically motivated. So at a certain point, like, what is that? What can you do? But I do think that, like, if you're making decision after decision that positively impacts one group, like, maybe there's a little something there, you know?
Mhm.
I kind of disagree. I mean, me personally, in the beginning, I thought Captain Harris was like doing the right thing, following the law. Even though it was a deadline, she kept emphasizing the fact that it was a deadline and this is the law. This is what we have to do according to Florida statute. But then, like with the situation with like the Friday Monday thing, I thought she kind of did acting like a political uh view or standpoint because she could have had the office closed so they could have extra couple hours to do the vote. So yeah.
Okay. Um, what did you know, if anything, about the 2000 election prior to the listening of this podcast? I did not know anything. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Like, I didn't even know who was Republican and Democratic in this race. Like, I wasn't really into politics much until I got into this class, so I didn't really know much.
Same.
What's your major? What's y'all's majors?
We're all political science majors. I'm not very. You guys aren't?
I'm
Mhm.
not advertising.
What? How
You're
are you
I am.
in this class?
It's a requirement.
Oh shoot.
Mhm.
Oh,
Like,
I'm getting
none.
mixed up with my other class. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's no prerequisites class.
You can just kind of take it.
Oh shoot. Well, I'm a poli sci major, which is really bad.
I'm poli sci.
I'm poli sci too. So you said you're advertising? Is everybody else poli sci?
I'm Homeland Security.
Oh, okay. That makes sense
Okay.
though.
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
you, Jalen?
Homeland Security.
Oh, okay. Okay,
And
that makes sense then.
wait, Ryan, you said you were what major?
Advertising.
Okay. Both of you guys are advertising, you and Brandon?
No, I'm a Homeland and Criminal Justice.
Okay, okay.
Are you just taking this class for funsies then? Or is it part
Pretty
of your
much.
advertising requirements?
It's a required one, probably 300.
Did you guys
Fascinating. Okay.
know anything
It's
about
really
the election?
say it again?
Did you guys know anything about the election?
Not at all.
I knew it was close. That's pretty much it.
It's
I knew
Gore and Bush. I knew it was close. That's about it.
Yeah. I didn't even know anything about like the Elian Gonzalez case. I was confused when I started listening to it. I was like, what are we talking about right now?
Yeah. I knew about it. So I took a class last semester called Science of Elections, which had which we did kind of chat about this. I would say that like the only thing with that was it wasn't, first off, it definitely wasn't as in depth. And second off, Science of Elections really is focused on the science of the election. There's significantly less like politics that come into it and significantly more just like what the facts, I guess, if that makes sense.
Like the
So I
psychology.
definitely, no, yeah, and like also like the class covered like gerrymandering and like what like the ballot design, like that type of stuff. So we talked a lot about like the ballot, the butterfly ballot, and we talked a lot about like the court cases because like those made a lot of rulings that were important, but we didn't really talk about any of the like campaigns or circumstances surrounding a lot of this. So I learned a lot about like, yeah, like I had no idea about Elian Gonzalez. I wasn't really, I didn't really know a lot of the background or like about the whole like calling the race too early and stuff. So all that was really interesting to learn. But I did know like some of the basics around it. And I was pretty well informed about the butterfly ballot.
I thought something interesting about the butterfly ballot was like when Catherine Harris was, I think it was her, maybe episode 2 or 3. She was like, I don't know how you could mess that up, type of thing. And she was really funny about it. I thought that was pretty funny. Like, geez. But I mean, the way that they explained it, like Gore was supposed to be like the third one down, but he was like in the second place. Like, it was weird.
Have y'all ever seen a picture of it? You can just Google butterfly ballot and
You know
look.
what's you know what's crazy? I'm actually looking at it right now. I looked it up because I was curious because you said you've seen it before. There's no way I would have ever got this right.
Actually.
Dude, this is no, because like it's like Gore is literally pointing to the third slot, but there's like there's markings on this to, like show how bad it was, and yeah, he's supposed to be at the second spot
Yeah, you guys
Yeah.
need to look it up. It's pretty crazy.
And they're, what are
because
they
there's a
called?
reform
Chads?
in
Yeah, like
chat.
it's
That was
like it is fill outable properly, but it's definitely like you would have to be fully mentally there. Like you would
yeah.
have to be fully paying attention. No, like
Yeah, and in West Palm
it's like a
Beach,
test.
yeah, in West Palm Beach, like specifically, that was another thing too that I thought was interesting, that everything happened in Florida, because I'm from Florida, so everything they were bringing up was like, wow, like I didn't even know this happened, like the whole Homestead Airport and everything. But West Palm Beach specifically, it's not the only city in Palm Beach County, but they have a lot of older people, and people go out there like to retire type of thing. So I can understand why they kind of messed up. Like they're a little old and a little senile.
Definitely. No, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, damn, you really got to be like paying full attention to and like thinking through where you're punching on these ballots. And if you're a little old, and they said that a lot of them vote early in the morning too, like
Yeah, they're
there's
groggy.
there's no way. And I was thinking too this entire time, I was like, how did this make it past so many people and nobody thought like this is way too confusing?
Both of them
You
actually
know?
approved it.
Huh?
The Democrats and Republicans actually approved the ballot before it
I
went to
know
the
that's what
president.
I'm saying. I'm like,
Crazy.
how did it make it past so many people? Like, how is this approved and stuff? And nobody thought to themselves, like, this is so confusing. This is not a good idea. Like,
Yeah, I honestly thought it looked a lot more simple than this. Like the image I had in my mind was kind of just like a piece of paper, kind of like this, but not the whole like the fact that it's so small.
yeah.
Okay. In some ways, the story of the 2000 presidential election sounds like a scripted movie with Florida in the starring role. In what ways did Florida embody the perfect storm, thereby putting it in front and center?
I basically said Florida being the swing state in a sense made it like the centerpiece of the whole election. Also the butterfly ballot being so bad, like we just talked about. And then I talked about the counties needing recounts, or not needing, but like being wanted as recounted in some cases.
Yeah. I hope focus like specifically on like the Cuban population, like from the first episode, like the fact that they kind of hated Gore because of the Elian Gonzalez stuff. And then when the Homestead Airport came around, like Gore had to choose between like his own environmentalist beliefs and the Cuban vote. So it was like the Cubans kind of messed that up for him a little bit. Just being so passionate about like, especially the kid too. Like that was a very crazy situation. So all of these things
Yeah.
is just a storm.
Yeah. I listed the things that I listed like on my like what immediately came to my mind of the things that were like created this perfect storm was the absentee ballots, the increase in third party candidates, which led to the butterfly ballot, the VNS model failure with like the whole calling it too early, and then all of these like Florida laws not necessarily making sense together. Like there was the whole where they like ruled that was, I think it was like may was more powerful than shall at one point. I'm trying to find um the quote, but like it, it's crazy that they were making a ruling because these two laws kind of like contradicted each other, and they determined whether may or shall was more important. And like that's just crazy. I mean, like I feel like that definitely had an impact too. They're like, which laws are we following right now? You know?
I'm gonna add on to that. I definitely agree. I put first off the Elian Gonzalez case because also on top of like everything, Gore had to. Oh, Gore also like completely deviated from his current like party's beliefs in order to back Elian Gonzalez, which also got him negative press and negative reputation with Democrats because he completely like 180 because it was Clinton's decision to send Elian back to Cuba. I want to say ultimately is what they said, which caused an uproar. And then like I said, the airport, Homestead Airport, he pretty much turned against him because he didn't make a decision fast enough. Um, But yeah, also the VNS failure calling the election prematurely. I definitely agree with the butterfly ballots. Like I also added that like post kind of like post election day with I also think it was a perfect storm because we also had within the circuit court we had a judge that was probably the worst judge that Gore could have gotten, which led him to go to the Supreme Court, which then led him to go to the US, like the National Court in DC. So I feel like it all just was the perfect storm for just craziness
Um,
and a fiasco. Roll credits.
this is kind of off topic.
But I just kind of thought it was wild how like going off what Aiden like said with like the circuit court judge. I just thought it was so wild how like they just like flipped their strategy once they found out who they got. They're like, let's just lose as quickly as possible and just appeal it immediately. Like they had the appeal ready before like he even made his decision. I just thought that was kind of I thought that was wild. How it's like immediately instead of trying to fight it out against a judge that they know they won't win against, they're like, let's just lose and just appeal it and let's just move on. So
Something adding to the beginning of it when I forgot, I think it was like the mayor maybe of Dade County, I want to say, when he kind of like walked off and just like didn't support Gore anymore. I think that really bit him in the butt as well.
Are you talking about Alex, the Alex guy, Alex Pinellas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was from first episode, I believe. Yeah, that was crazy. And kind of like messed up. Like I feel like the whole walk off was a little extra. He could have just talked to him afterwards, but
He seemed like an extra character from what we gathered, though.
yeah.
I agree. No.
I mean, but he was trying to get Gore was trying to use him for the Cuban support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's Cuban. There's a lot of Cubans in Miami.
Well, I just
Well,
wanted to
and
say,
Go
I just want to say, I thought the whole Elion situation could have been a movie itself, in my opinion. And like kind of going to the last question, I thought like the bingo part of that situation made me really mad. I was yelling bingo when he came and got him, and then
Oh my gosh, that was so like
yeah.
inconsiderate. Oh my God. I remember, yeah, that was just crazy. Like, oh, one thing I hated was the guy that found him in the water. He was doing too much. Like
mm-hmm.
the fact that he felt like he had the authority to be in the van with them was a little crazy. He kind of overplayed his role a lot too. Also an extra character, but
That dude was just sucking
the media attention.
yeah, that was
Mhm.
insane. And his cousin was absolutely correct saying that he did that.
Yeah, definitely. I was kind of like, you just found him. Like, what are you still doing in this story?
Yeah, why are you
Sometimes.
going to their house? Like, I don't think he even did Elion know how to speak English?
I'm
You guys
gonna
know?
guess. I'm gonna guess no, probably,
Yeah.
right?
So like what's the connect here? Like how are you connecting to these people
Yeah.
right
It
now?
was bizarre.
Yeah, that
Have,
really was bizarre.
have y'all seen the picture of when Elion got taken? They kind of like described it of like how they sent in like I think military and SWAT and all that stuff to like take him from the house that he was at. And there's a famous picture of I think it was Elion's cousin Elion and then a military member like
Mhm.
like getting the kid from the closet. And I looked it up and it's a crazy picture to see.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Was that his cousin? That was his cousin that had him in the closet? I thought the guy
I
had him in the closet.
think so. I don't actually quite remember. I just remember that like I remember I was looking up the whole Alien Gonzalez case and that's the only thing I kept seeing and I was like and then later on in the episode in the first episode they um actually like painted kind of the picture. I think it
Yeah.
was his cousin.
Yeah, that picture's crazy. I'm looking at it right now. Okay.
Like, bro, why are you pointing a fully automatic gun at a child? Like what is he gonna do?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
traumatizing.
Wait, you
Yeah,
guys, I think he became a lawmaker in Cuba.
I think he did too. I'm looking at that right now.
Wait, what? Oh yeah,
He
yeah.
entered. He's in Cuban Congress now.
Jesus.
Cuba's
Good for
Congress.
him.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
from Little Rafter in Miami to congressman in Cuba.
yeah.
So, okay.
Damn.
Next question. All the best stories take unexpected, often ironic twists and turns. The 2000 presidential election is no different. What ironies do you recall and what lessons do they impart for political parties and campaigns in the future? I said the irony of Gore like winning the popular vote by like a little bit and then Bush winning the electoral college vote kind of shows like I guess the importance that every vote definitely counts, but also like the electoral like it shows how much power the electoral college also has for any election. And I think the same thing happened in 2016 with Trump and Hillary, correct? Maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's happened a couple times, several times, I think, in our history,
Yeah.
like 3 or 4.
I also talked about the butterfly ballot on top of the whatchamacallit, electoral college and how the popular vote matters, but at the same time it never really matters. Even in the future elections that are soon to come. But more specifically the butterfly ballot and how, at least to my knowledge, I haven't seen that in other presidential elections. I need to fact check that before I set that in stone. But it's not popularized, I don't think, anymore after that one. So
Yeah. Um, something to add here. It's not really relevant, kind of, but my grandma had told me around that time she was like driving in Miami, and she said that she saw like a whole bunch of ballots just like out on the street, like thrown out. I was like, that's crazy. I don't know if they like. She said she saw a whole bunch of papers when everything was going out, so I thought that was funny.
That is crazy.
Yeah, I think.
Holy.
Huh?
I said, holy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
History.
sorry, y'all. Sorry, y'all.
All
That
right,
is.
moving on.
Do you guys want to add to that question?
Um, I think that like I'll mention again. I know I mentioned it earlier, but also like this moment was definitely the most like just frustrating and stuff for me was but also like ironic and I don't know was again when they like were what when they were arguing over which ballots to like be more lenient with and they were taking these like strange be more lenient with this but not with this and it was just like it would be so much better for their image and campaigns if they would just choose the side um
Oh, oh, good.
because it looked very like I mean obviously and this is probably true too but it also made it look very like we only want to count the ballots that help us you know and so that was just I was just like come on you guys like let's think about PR here let's think this stuff through you know
Yeah, as politicians are usually pretty smart with their campaigning tactics, I feel like this one was not at all. Like, this was the worst case of bad politician PR and stuff like that. Um, somebody had brought up earlier were like when they were doing the 4 types of at the end when they were doing the vote counts and they chose one and it showed that like Gore won by 3 and then the one that like Bush wasn't really for showed that he won. I thought that's pretty ironic too. Okay, you guys want to add anything else? Brandon, Jalen, Aiden?
I mean, not ironic, but I just thought it was interesting about the chat situation because like they have 4 different kinds, like the hanging chat, the swinging door chat, the dimple chat, and the pregnant chat. So I just thought, what are we arguing over about these chat situations when they was talking about the recounts, about these tiny little pieces of papers that was getting poked out and everything. So I was like, who really wins at the end of the situation?
Yeah. I think they brought up the fact that like there was one like the pregnant ones or the ones that go the other way. I think they brought up an interesting point where it was like you can kind of see the intent of them trying to do that ballot. So it's like maybe you should count that type of thing.
Yeah,
think-
I kind of thought. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I remember that. I think it was the pregnant chats. I remember specifically them talking about more. 'Cause I think those were the ones that were like there was intent behind it. Or like I want to say the dimple chats they said were like
Dimple, that's what I was talking about.
they're very like tiny, so it's like you can't really tell.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like intent. If the intent is very clear, then it should count. Like if you know if there's like an argument to be made about the intent, like oh well two of the holes kind of have that little marking or whatever, then like okay that shouldn't count. But it's like if it's very clear that this was their intent, then is it really fair for it not to count? Like I don't know.
Well,
But
the intent situation brings up like the main ending point of the Equal Protection Act and the Supreme Court thing. How they figure out how do you define intent of a voter? And I'm thinking intent of the county of counting votes, if I remember right. I thought the whole thing. I thought there was a good point made by Bush and the justices that they recognized.
I just think that like you can pretty clearly tell like if there were multiple like if there were multiple holes made or there were multiple marks or something, then that's a little different than having like a very clear there was a single marking. I don't know. I think it was possible.
The whole thing's ridiculous. Should not have been back in the
Chaos.
Situation because now here we are, and where we had sitting here talking about this 24-year later, we're like, just like this should just not use that ballot in the first place. So should have known it would be flawed from the beginning.
I I was thinking like the whole time thinking about this. I mean, listening to this stuff, I was just like, I know that these people were probably mad when they voted for Bush and he won, and then 9/11 happened. Like not even a full year after you get inaugurated, something like that happens. And there's conspiracies that he had involvement or whatever. But I feel like just it was just a bad look in the first place for it to even happen under your presidency. So I was thinking about like how people felt after the election and when that happened.
Bush got reelected, right? He did 8 years, right?
Did he?
Yeah, he did.
Gosh, I know nothing about politics.
Because his
Approval rating from 9/11 was so high that kind of just like
Was it? Okay. Yeah.
catapulted him to people
Yeah,
being
like
2008.
rallying behind him and stuff like that, where he just kind of was able to win again.
Okay. Well,
Mhm.
I got the other side of that because I remember Kanye was like, "Don't trust Bush" in this one thing. Like that's all I've seen about like that. Not that I was believing him, but like that's all I've ever heard. So I've only really ever heard people not really supporting Bush after what happened.
Oh,
I
the
mean,
country was kind of. I was gonna say like the country I think was trying to like, or at least the rhetoric was like let's all come together. So he had a pretty high approval rating, and it was like a pretty. Yeah, I don't know. I would say it kind of helped his political career in certain ways.
yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, obviously the like 9/11 was awful, and like, yeah, under any presidency, it's gonna be like kind of a stain. But the way that Bush handled it boosted him because he did a really good job of like of handling it and like making sure he took the right steps post 9/11 for like New York and pledging to um win the war on terrorism and like all that stuff. Also, I was just gonna make a quick little fun comment. I think the fact that we had a history in a time period where we saw Kanye in politics was just not real.
Yeah. I can't believe he ran for president or
I can't
tried.
believe he got votes.
Yeah. Honestly, he's a bit of a joke. I love him, but he's a bit funny.
He's a fun character.
Yeah, he's just a character. Him and Donald Trump, they're just characters.
See a little Kanye vice president?
Hmm?
How that Kanye vice president would be wild.
Oh, who do you did Donald Trump say who his vice president would be?
I don't know.
Okay.
He
Who
has
do you
to be
guys
declared the candidate first. He has to be like finalized and
Oh,
declared
think
the
he is gonna be
candidate.
the candidate?
Yeah, but it has to be like a finalized thing.
He can't say anything about who he thinks he wants it to be, or
I
no?
mean, he can, but like he won't probably.
Who do you guys think he'll run with? Somebody was saying like Vivek, but I don't think he'll choose Vivek. But honestly,
I think it'd be really funny if it was like Nikki Haley or someone that he like ran against and won, like
Well,
Ramaswamy or something crazy.
yeah, I don't think. Well, Ramaswamy endorsed him, right?
I think so. So
Yeah,
like,
I don't think Nikki Haley has yet, but I don't think she. Honestly, I don't think she will.
well, normally vice presidents are people who ran for president and failed during that term.
Definitely won't be Pence. Or is
Yeah.
definitely won't be Pence.
So I mean I would if he's following history, it'll probably be one of the people he at these like Republican debates, but
Scott.
that doesn't mean that it will be because it's Trump.
Did you guys hear? Do you guys know the Kennedy that's running in the Independent?
Mhm.
Do you know he tried to get Aaron Rodgers to be his vice president?
Aaron Rodgers?
Yep,
Yeah.
he
That
tried.
is just silly. What
The
in
only
the
reason I
And
know that because my roommate's a huge Jets guy and was like, "Yeah, no, if Aaron Rodgers decides to go be a vice president, he can't play for us anymore." And I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, no, Kennedy wanted him to be his vice president," and I was like, "That's just stupid."
does
and he
anyone
ran
here?
Say again?
he was independent?
Yeah, I think he switched from Democrat to Independent.
Okay.
Does anyone know the show Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah, I haven't watched it.
Well, their like wife on there, is his like is in real life Kennedy's a wife.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
The actress, yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
That guy sounds a little crazy, man.
He is totally
From the things that I've
bonkers.
heard, from the things that I've heard.
Yeah,
Hey, yo, I'm gonna step out.
Okay.
Um,
yeah.
See y'all
uh,
All
later.
right,
appreciate y'all.
all
Thank you.
right.
Hey, you have a
Sounds
good one.
good. All right, yeah, I'm gonna head out to class too. I'll see y'all later
All right,
though.
all right,
Bye.
y'all. I'll see y'all.